There was drama down under, as the dominance of Verstappen abruptly ended with a reliability issue on just the third lap of the Grand Prix in Australia. It led to a thrilling race with a Carlos Sainz victory, where the Spaniard continued to make sure that he is the one to take the win when Verstappen isn't able to. It was a thrilling race weekend with a lot of talking points, so here's my 5 things we learned from the Australian Grand Prix. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Sainz proves Ferrari wrong. Carlos Sainz managed to recover well enough to get himself back into his car after being unable to compete in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix after he had to have his appendix removed. The Spanish driver was the one to break Verstappen's longest winning run in history back in Singapore last year, and it was the same driver here in Australia to be there to step onto the top step of the podium for the 3rd year in a row. Sainz has a lot to prove in 2024. He's a free agent for next season and will be the most experienced and perhaps most in-demand available driver on the grid next year. And performances like this one perhaps even suggest that Ferrari's call to bring Lewis Hamilton to the team for next season might have even been a mistake. Sainz took the lead from Verstappen on lap 2, following a mistake from the Dutch driver. It seemed like the Red Bull might have been seeing some issues already before the subsequent retirement, but Sainz did an incredible job to take advantage of the new rules regarding DRS for this season. The rules have changed so that DRS is now enabled a lap earlier than previous seasons, so the cars are more likely to be in a bunched up position when it's finally enabled. This is exactly what this rule change did today, and it resulted in a brilliant outcome for the Ferrari as they looked very strong in the tricky conditions in Melbourne. Following the retirement of Verstappen, Sainz very quickly built a strong lead at the front of the race. It seemed like, in free air, he could manage his tyres incredibly well. This meant that despite the undercut being strong this weekend, the Spanish driver wasn't worried about this situation, as his lead meant he could continue to run his race as he extended the opening stint. This extension gave him newer tyres as the race continued, and with Leclerc, the driver behind, the Ferrari team made the very sensible decision to ensure Leclerc did not fight his teammate. This decision was great to see in my opinion, but the team have dropped the driver that was in the lead for next year, so to see them decide to maximise the result and not let them fight was a great call. And I believe this is something that has come from Fred Vasseur becoming the team principal. The team have a clear strategy and know that they needed to not let the cars fight each other in order to maximise the fact that Sainz had fresher tyres. The high tyre degradation was a difficult thing for many drivers in traffic, while Sainz was comfortable out at the front and easing his way to his 3rd Formula 1 race victory. It was an amazing achievement considering the driver has been on bed rest since Saudi Arabia, and based on reports he's not been fighting fit all weekend, particularly when outside of the car. But he still made it happen for himself this weekend to qualify 2nd and then comfortably win the race. It was an amazing result, and for me, it deserves a purple box. He took advantage of the Red Bull mistake and led the team to a 1-2 after being so unwell in the last Grand Prix. And to be honest, I can't imagine a better advert for his services for 2025. Do let me know where you want Carlos Sainz to go in 2025 in the comments, and if you believe that Ferrari have made a mistake by letting him go. And while you're there, do leave this video a like and hit subscribe to help me on the road towards 100,000 subscribers. McLaren maximise their result. McLaren haven't looked like they've been able to be close to the second best team in 2024. They're in the mix with Mercedes and Aston Martin, but they've struggled to compete with Ferrari and Red Bull. Towards the end of last year, the team were, at times, the strongest behind Red Bull, but this isn't something that they've been able to follow up on early this year. The McLaren team remain behind Ferrari and the Red Bull of Verstappen this weekend, but they seem to take a step forward. There have been moments in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia where McLaren could demonstrate their strengths. However, this weekend, they looked even better. It was great to see both drivers at the front getting the most from their car. The team ended up 3rd and 4th, and this has helped the team build a gap away from Mercedes and Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship. For me, if McLaren can come 3rd in this World Championship, then they'll have taken another good step forward. I think they should be strong again in Japan, as this was a track that they did well at last year with the high-speed corners. It was a bit of disappointment for Oscar Piastri this weekend, considering he made a mistake in the final chicane, locking up at the end of his 2nd stint. This happened after the team had given Piastri a preferred pit stop to prevent an undercut from Russell behind, and then subsequently let Norris back through on track. Norris commented after the race that he believed he could have finished second had he been allowed to pit first during that first stint and gain the undercut on Leclerc. But the risk on Piastri was more significant at that moment for the team, as he could have been caught by the drivers behind. After the swap back and the Australians' mistake, Piastri finished a few seconds behind his teammate, and this is exactly what we saw in 2023 in the majority of races. The Australian driver is very close to Norris, and he's still very early in his career, but the experience of Norris is certainly showing in that team. On the whole, it's definitely a green box for McLaren this weekend for maximising their points. Max's win streak abruptly ends. Max Verstappen hasn't put a foot wrong all season, and he hadn't had a retirement in 2 years since the Australian Grand Prix in 2022. But this all went wrong in the opening laps of the race this year, as his right rear brake caught fire just a couple of laps into this race after it was reportedly stuck on from the beginning of the race. The Dutchman seemed to make a mistake to lose a position to Sainz under DRS on the second lap, which was likely caused by this brake issue. And from there his race was very quickly over, as his right rear caught fire and subsequently exploded on his crawl back to the pits. What's amazing is the fact that Verstappen managed to keep the lead for that long while managing this brake issue from the beginning. In 2024, F1 reliability is bulletproof, and you would expect that a team like Red Bull would have the best car on the grid and shouldn't have to push it to its limits to win each race. After the brake issue became terminal, Verstappen managed to get the car back to the pits, but once it was there, the brake caught fire and it even looked like it had caused subsequent suspension damage. In my view, the driver was fortunate that he'd made it back to the pits, as he has a brand new power unit in his car for this weekend, and had he not made it back to the pits, you never know how uncontrolled that fire could have been, and if any damage to the engine could have been done. It seems like this issue shouldn't affect Verstappen for the rest of the year, and I would expect that the team will very quickly understand the reason for the issue and make sure that it doesn't happen again. But this doesn't replace the fact that Verstappen was fuming that his race ended so soon today, and he expects more from his team in 2024. I'm sure this won't impact Verstappen's cruise to the World Championship this season. He's still got the dominant car, and the fact that Sergio Perez was well off the pace this weekend meant that his main championship rival didn't really capitalise on the fact that Verstappen ended this weekend without any points. So I think we can anticipate continued dominance for the rest of the year. But this weekend has proved that Red Bull isn't immune to mistakes or reliability issues, and in a way, it's promising to see that they can be beaten. On the whole, Max didn't put a foot wrong once again, but the team let him down. So for me, it's got to be a red box for Red Bull this weekend. They've been strong all season, and will surely win the championship, but they need to do better than this if they want to continue the dominance this year. Williams make a brutal but correct decision, and it pays off. Williams have had a difficult winter, and subsequently a difficult start to 2024. Under James Vowles, the team have been making some significant investments to improve and build their way back to the front of the Formula One grid, and a big part of this is modernisation. The team have been open about the fact that this will take time and result in compromises having to be made in the short run. This is exactly what has happened. The team were late with their car this year, and they only had 2 chassis available to them for the 3rd race of the year in Australia. Alex Albon didn't help the team after a mistake in FP1 resulted in significant damage for the Williams car. It was determined by the team that the damage could not be repaired with the car out in Australia, and so the team would only be able to run a single car for the rest of the race weekend. This is where the team made a difficult but sensible decision to put Alex Albon in Logan Sargent's car for the rest of the weekend. This decision was the right one, as based on the driver's form since the pair became teammates, there has been no question that Alex Albon has been the stronger point scorer, as he's achieved 27 to Sargent's 1. But at the same time, it was a brutal call considering Sargent had done nothing wrong and didn't really deserve the demotion to the bench. This situation might be very difficult for Sargent to deal with. He barely kept hold of his seat for this year, and probably only kept it based on the fact that there weren't too many strong drivers available on the sidelines. I think it's inevitable that the American driver won't be in Formula One for too much longer, but this moment in his career will be pivotal. The way he responds to this situation will be important for him to hopefully come back stronger and find a way to be more competitive this season. Given the competitive nature of the bottom 5 teams in 2024 and the strength of the top 5, there needs to be opportunistic moves from these bottom 5 to score points in 2024. Williams know that their best chance is to have Alex Albon in the car to maximise the result, and this is what he ended up doing. Albon finished 11th, finishing behind both Haas cars and the RB of Tsunoda. This result is probably the best they could have asked for this weekend, and yes, it isn't quite points, but at the end of the day, with 3 teams still without points so far this year, these best finishes might be important when it comes to determining final World Championship positions, and this 11th place actually puts them ahead of Sauber in the Constructors' Championship standings, so for me, it was worth it. Williams definitely deserve an amber box this weekend. They've done wrong things by not having a third chassis available for the drivers at this point in the season, but they made the most of a difficult situation and made the right call to put Alex Albon in the one car that they had available to maximise their result. A disaster for Mercedes. It was a disastrous weekend for Mercedes with a double DNF in Melbourne. The team have looked off the pace all season. At the beginning of the year, after testing, James Allison seemed quietly confident and happy with the pace of the car, but in reality, the team have yet another car where the drivers don't feel confident. Hamilton, in particular, has commented that he doesn't understand the car's behaviour. The British driver seems disappointed in the Mercedes team, and I'm sure he's happy he made the call during the off-season to move to Ferrari. The team had an up and down weekend, with them being off the pace on Friday, suddenly very quick in FP3, and then to have Hamilton fail to make it through to Q3 at all. Despite this move up and down the order, the team and drivers seem not to fully understand why this is the case. Both drivers commented on the radio during the Grand Prix that the Red Bull of Sergio Perez was a rocket ship. This is concerning, but not surprising. However, the fact that Perez then struggled to get up towards McLaren and Ferrari says a lot about the gap between Mercedes and these other top teams. Hamilton had an engine failure on lap 15 in a disappointing reliability moment for the team. The fact that an engine seems to have gone wrong just 3 races into the season is another concern, which I'm sure the team will be investigating. But either way, the Mercedes driver was frustrated right from the start of the race. He opted for soft compound tyres from the start, and he was the only driver to make that strategy call. This meant he was out of sync with the other drivers on the grid in the first place. Russell's race seemed better, but he was still well behind the Ferrari and McLaren cars, as well as the Red Bull of Sergio Perez. In the end, Russell's race for 6th was with Fernando Alonso, a disappointing position to be in anyway, but in the end, the British driver ended the race in the barrier after he got caught up under the rear wing of Alonso into turn 6, losing downforce and control of his car, as he ended up failing to make the high-speed corner. It seemed like the closing speed he had on the Aston Martin was significantly higher than previous laps, and it was clear that Mercedes immediately believed that there was something wrong with the move, and they saw irregularities in the Aston Martin's braking. This incident was being investigated at the time of recording, but so far, no outcome has come from that. On the whole, even without the penultimate lap incident, I believe it would be a red box for Mercedes this weekend. They had a terrible time in Australia, and their promise from the start of the year has disappeared very quickly. Honourable mentions. There was another issue with the Sauber pit stops early on in this race, as Valtteri Bottas had a cross-threaded wheel nut right at the beginning. Zhou had a slow pit stop midway through the Grand Prix as well, and I believe there was even a loose wheel nut at Bottas' second stop. The team made changes to their pit stop equipment through the winter, but it's caused nothing but problems for the team. If the team had a decent car, they'd be failing to take advantage of that, but in reality right now, they're right at the back of the order, hence it isn't deserving of a red box just yet. Haas deserves a positive honourable mention for scoring 3 points and a double point scoring finish in Australia. It was a brilliant weekend for them and back-to-back weekends with points in 2024. Yuki Tsunoda secured 4 points for an 8th position in what was a great result for the driver and team. The Japanese driver is getting more and more consistent and he's doing well against a struggling Daniel Ricciardo. The driver seems to be doing all he can to show Red Bull he's worth keeping around, but time will tell if that turns into something more for that driver. It was a dramatic race in Australia, and something that was necessary for Formula 1 as a whole in 2024. It's nice to see a change up in the order for at least one race this year. But let me know what I missed in the comments, and make sure to learn more about why I think Daniel Ricciardo's off the pace by watching this video next.